MAGA Republican senators and Congress members are panicking as Donald Trump doesn't even know what the hell's going on anymore. I mean, the American people are livid. Donald Trump's latest approval is at 37% historic lows. So they bring in MAGA Republican Senator Ashley Moody, who says, we all know, though, that Donald Trump has worked so hard to avoid conflict. He's the peace president and he's avoiding conflict. This is what they're going with. You're playing this clip.
And I think President Trump and everyone working with him would say they are trying to do everything they can to avoid armed conflict. They want to make sure they're protecting our homeland, they're protecting Americans, they're protecting American interests, they're protecting Americans that may be abroad. And they have done everything they can think of to avoid this conflict. Now, you can't put your head in the sand and avoid threats.
I could think of things to avoid it. Start off with avoiding it, not just running into wars everywhere. And then Donald Trump holding press conferences and Pete Hegseth holding press conferences, acting like they love it and acting like they love death. Death's raining down upon them. I mean, how about we don't do that in the United States of America? So then they have MAGA Republican Congress member Randy Fine on another state regime media, which calls itself Newsmax. And this is just like, if you're wondering, like, Ben, what is going on in right-wing media? Like, what are Republican Congress members talking about? Because things are like down for them. So like, what are they talking about? This, just so you know, this is what they're doing. Here, play this clip.
I can barely listen to this man. The mayor, Mamdani, the headline of the day was that a peaceful protester exercising his First Amendment rights hurt his feelings, as opposed to blaming ISIS-inspired terrorists for tossing bombs into a crowd. I don't even know what to even say anymore. Do you have words to respond to this, sir?
Well, I have one word. It's deport. I mean, the fact of the matter is Mamdani hates America, hates the Judeo-Christian civilization that we have here.
Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking. Hello? America is in a war in Iran. The markets are tanking. Biggest oil supply shock in history right now. We have ICE Border Patrol and ICE Gestapo killing people in our freaking streets right now. Americans can't afford anything. And this is what you're talking about. But Senator Joni Ernst has a plan. And we're going to send in special forces into Iran who are going to extract the uranium like it's Mission Impossible. That's the plan, everybody. Here, play this clip.
Yes, Stuart, I think most of the American public would agree, and I agree with this as well, that we shouldn't be sending conventional forces into Iran. That would be our regular army and any Marines that might go by ground. But certainly the use of our special operators is a tool that we will always keep in our tool belt. They can be surgically inserted into various situations. They can cause the enemy great harm and great benefit to the United States of America. They can go in quickly and be extracted quickly. So yes, this is a group, an organization that we do like to use.
So don't put forces in, but put the forces into Iran. And then if you're wondering, well, what are they saying on CNBC right now? Because what's the thesis right now with Donald Trump just literally being, an insane human being? This is what they're talking about on CNBC. 250th year of American anniversary. Spirit animals. Our spirit animals will make everything magically great. Here, play this clip.
Be a place that people are going to come. We have FIFA. The country has the opportunity to coalesce around America 250, a positivity that could have animal spirits bring the market higher with the.
You think that's a catalyst?
I think that positivity and animal spirits is always a catalyst.
Let's bring in Democratic Congressmember Joe Neguse. Congressman, how are you? I throw you softballs. You are my favorite, although I'll say among my favorites, so I don't get any other Congress members jealous of the way you cross-examined, Kristi Noem before she got fired, when you're up there. But I throw you softballs, Congressmember. But like these serious issues, America is suffering and in crisis by a result of this incompetent and dangerous regime. What do you make of kind of just this present moment that we're in, Congressman?
Yeah, well, it's great to be with you. Look, it's hard for me to formulate the words to respond to that montage that you just played. I mean, I guess my sort of general sense is that President Trump is more unpopular today than he has ever been throughout, the last decade, essentially, since he entered public life. And as a result, it's not surprising to me that you see these sycophantic supporters on television and on the, in the interviews that you just played, defending him, at every turn, because they've capitulated to him at every turn over the course of the last 14 months. But they're really the only people left who will defend this administration and the nonsensical arguments that they made. And of course, I don't really know how to respond to that last interview on CNBC sufficiently. I suppose I would just simply say to you that here in the real world, as you know, I represent Western and Northern Colorado. Families are hurting right now. I mean, the economy is in free fall. Unemployment is now ticking up. This month was the worst jobs report that we've seen since COVID, just by way of example. Inflation now hitting new record highs, obviously, in part connected to the war in Iran that the president has started unconstitutionally, I might add. And so at the end of the day, my sense from the folks that I serve and represent here in Colorado is that most people recognize that this president is not working to further their interests, that ultimately the president cares about himself and his family and his own bottom line. And the only people who are willing to defend that kind of approach to politics happen to be, as I said, those sycophantic supporters that you just showed. It's shameful, but it is where we are, unfortunately.
And unfortunately, at least for now, until we get to the midterms, Article 1, Congress, is controlled by MAGA Republicans and MAGA Mike, perhaps the biggest sycophant of them all. So there's very little that Congress is doing in terms of asserting its Article 1 checks and balances over the executive branch, other than through the kind of oversight that you and others are able to do. And, these Trump cabinet members do not like showing up. They've showed up far less than any other administration. But when you do show up, Congressman, you've got your 5 minutes and you've got your cross-examination skills and you've got your oversight ability. So that seems to be the only area, while MAGA's been able to control Congress, where there's some ability to do it. And look, and your cross-exam of Kristi Noem and others, has been very effective. Just talk us through kind of that process, because it's been very, very, very important.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things I'd say, and I appreciate the kind words. There's a reason that Secretary Noem delayed appearing before the House Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee for essentially 14 months, longer than any of her predecessors in both Democratic and Republican administrations. It's because I think she understood that the moment that she would be testifying in front of our two committees, that ultimately accountability would follow, and we saw that in real time. One of the tragedies, I would say, of the current political environment, and I know you know this well, is that unfortunately oversight and transparency, these hearings are often seen through a partisan lens. You hope that there are moments where you can kind of permeate, the partisan gridlock and connect to the American people more broadly. And I think that happened last week. Was a great example of this, because the corruption and the fraud that the Department of Homeland Security was engaged in under Secretary Noem's leadership was so blatant that when finally given an opportunity to shine a light on it through the hearings, the dual hearings in the Senate and in the House, ultimately that effectively proved to be too much for even this president, who is mired in corruption himself, to tolerate. And ultimately, that's why I believe a decision was made to terminate Secretary Noem. So oversight still matters. It still matters a great deal. And I think it's important for people to remember that. I know it can feel a bit hopeless right now in this moment, just given the parade of horribles that the Trump administration is engaged in. But people lifting their voices, stepping up, standing up, and ultimately their representatives in Congress using the bully pulpit that has been bestowed on us to ultimately exact accountability, I think still matters and is still consequential.
What's so interesting, though, is that I also felt that the Pam Bondi hearing was able to appeal on a bipartisan basis and kind of condemnation of Bondi, the Attorney General, but she didn't get fired. So I think it's an interesting case study, though, in why Pam Bondi performed arguably worse than Kristi Noem, if that was even possible with her. The Dow was 50,000, Donald J. Trump, But Kristi Noem got fired. And, my thesis is Trump actually liked what Bondi said, because as horrible as it looked and as universally condemned as it was, she just stayed with Donald Trump's the greatest. The Dow is 50,000. And he liked that. But Noem was kind of cornered into the cross-exam to say things that were unflattering about Donald Trump. The ad campaign was a bad ad campaign, and your cross-examinations, not just kind of about the corruption, but the unpopularity it brought upon Donald Trump, that he wasn't the one personally making the money, but that there were other people making money off the detention and not him. To me, that was the effectiveness of your cross. There was a lot, but at the layer, Trump wasn't the one profiting. There was this other group of people making the money. That, to me, was the difference between the Bondi and the Noem. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, you said this so well. You articulated it really well, right? There's this calculus of, yes, clearly the president was embarrassed by, the corruption and the fraud, the self-dealing that we exposed during the course of this hearing. But I also think he was perhaps envious of it. And to your point, right, there's this question as to where he was landing in that regard. There's some public reporting that indicates that he's now peppering aides about precisely whom benefited politically from that $220 million ad campaign. So it's not surprising, as I said, given that the president has been engaged in all sorts of shady self-dealing, the crypto schemes for his family, billions of dollars, and all the rest. That this particular example that we had effectively exposed to the American public would offend him because by all accounts, at least so far, although perhaps we'll learn more, he wasn't directly, involved in it. And so in any event, I think that to me speaks volumes about why she was ultimately fired. But look, I will also just say, Ben, that this was the first step, not the last step. There's more work for us to do here in the coming days and weeks, because there's a lot more to find out in terms of who made money off of these deals. There's a lot we don't know. And so we're not stopping in terms of trying to get the answers. And I think hoping that the Inspector General will launch an investigation of his own.
And finally, it seems that a lot of what's going on in Iran and a lot of the distraction efforts by Donald Trump just seem to also coincide with some breakthroughs in the Epstein files and more information being released and becoming, increasingly clear that the FBI was hiding files that related to accusations about Donald Trump. The Charleston paper just did a report and said, look, we can't speak to what she says about Trump, but this person was saying accurate things about what happened in Charleston at that time that were very specific and unique. And the FBI deemed this witness credible enough. It was said that there was multiple rounds of interviews with the FBI said they wouldn't have taken place if they didn't view this witness against Trump, who's made accusations, as being serious. But then there's also all these other hidden emails, and people are just learning a lot more and about Donald Trump's involvement of it all. And then, that kind of people are talking about it less. And so I think before we go, how do we stay focused on a lot of these things while also, Donald Trump's involved, brought the United States into this horrible war. He wants mass distraction. So how do we stay focused? What do you suggest with all this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say, Ben, I noted this at the top. President Trump is deeply unpopular. He is historically the most unpopular president at this juncture of his presidency than any other president in the modern history of the country. And given that, you are going to see him and his administration attempt to obfuscate even more, right? And to attempt to distract the American public from a wide variety of scandals that are impacting this administration, including the one that you just mentioned. Anything to distract, the American public from the Epstein files, to distract the American public from, again, the incredibly difficult economic circumstances that he has now imposed on the American people. And I just think we're going to have to continue to beat the drum to make the case directly to Americans to ignore the noise, right, that might be coming, or rather is coming, from this administration, and to focus fundamentally on whether or not the administration has done anything to make your life better. That, to me, is the core question that I think most folks, at least the folks that I represent in Colorado, are asking themselves. And the answer is a resounding no. And so I hope that we can continue to kind of make that case and make that point in the days and the weeks and the months ahead. And I think we will.
Congressmember Joe Neguse, appreciate you joining us as always.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.